Like I've mentioned in other videos, the 3D Mario titles are by far the most popular. While some 2D games might sell more copies, everybody remembers the 3D titles. In a lot of ways, these games changed the genre of platforming dramatically. Super Mario Odyssey, which was one of the most recent ones, was a great example of this. But at the end of the day, the very first one was obviously the most influential. Super Mario 64 changed everything. However, what would you say if I told you that Super Mario 64 wasn't actually the very first 3D Mario game out there? According to rumors on the internet, there was actually one that came before. A game shrouded in mystery that Nintendo rarely talks about and didn't even release. So what happened to it? What did it look like? And was it better than the legendary Super Mario 64? Well, let's find out. Most people think that the story of 3D Super Mario started with the well-known Super Mario 64, a 3D platformer game released for the new Nintendo 64 console in 1996. Since its release, Super Mario 64 has been widely acclaimed as one of the greatest and most important games of all time. This is when the 3D era began for Nintendo. Well, according to a lot of fans on the internet. However, today, you and I will be exploring the real beginning of the 3D era for Nintendo. And this story starts with the SNES console, the Nintendo home console that came before the Nintendo 64. It was called the Super Nintendo Entertainment System and was a 16-bit home video game console developed by Nintendo that was released in the early 90s. While the games were still in a 2D style, the resolution was a lot better, colors were more clear and vivid, and Nintendo was able to create significantly more complex games with it. However, there was also one other thing that made this console unique, and this feature is also incredibly important when it comes to finding out more about this lost Super Mario title. This SNES console was designed to accommodate the ongoing development of a variety of enhanced chips, which were integrated into game cartridges and were used to remain competitive into the next generation. And one of these chips is known as the Super FX. This was some sort of supporting chip and was added to select SNES game cartridges. It was made to allow for advanced 2D and even 3D graphics in certain Nintendo games like Star Fox and Yoshi's Island. This single chip was a game changer, and thanks to it, Miyamoto got an idea that is now known today as Super Mario FX. But what is that even? Well, it was a Super Mario game that was rumored to be in development during the lifetime of the SNES, and it would have used the Super FX chip to display 3D graphics. Early claims regarding the topic surfaced on video game forum websites such as the Lost Levels forum in 2004, and these theories were supported by a feature on the gaming website IGN in 2007, claiming that Miyamoto spent years trying to build a fully 3D Mario platformer for the SNES before he finally admitted that the technology just wasn't there for him. Now, while IGN did not list a source, the Wikipedia page for Mario 64 at the time had referenced an interview with Miyamoto in the January 1996 issue of Nintendo Power, which IGN used and might have misconstrued. In it, Miyamoto stated, "I first had the idea to do a 3D Mario game when I was working on Star Fox. That was 5 years ago. Now, as Star Fox released on the SNES and used the Super FX chip to display full 3D graphics, this may have led to the conclusion that Miyamoto was referring to a 3D Mario title using the same hardware, even though he never specified that the idea was for any console in the interview itself. Additionally, this interpretation would suggest that Miyamoto was developing a title for the SNES years after the Nintendo 64 hardware had begun development, as Project Reality, the codename for the Nintendo 64, was announced in August 1993, only about a half year after Star Fox was released. So was all of this fake? Was there really no 3D Super Mario game for the SNES ever in development? Well, it does seem like that was the case. There is no solid proof for all of this, because in an article from SNES Central, F&G details that they contacted Dylan Kubert, the designer of the Super FX chip, and lead programmer of Star Fox. And he confirmed that no 3D Mario platformer was in development for the SNES, and that Super Mario FX was actually a codename for the chip itself. That is where the whole misconception came from, and the only reason why Mario was added to the title of the chip is because it stood for the following: mathematical, ergonaut, rotation, and input-output. This was also printed on the face of the final production chip. So it seems like Super Mario FX was never a reality. However, Miyamoto was playing around with the concept of a 3D Mario title and did use the SNES and its technology to experiment with the idea a bit. Miyamoto really did consider using the chip to develop an SNES game with gameplay based on an entire world in miniature like miniature trains. However, it seems like that the original idea ended up in Super Mario RPG, which was released for the SNES in '96. I'm not sure if this was truly the case, but the original concept of a 3D Mario involved the fixed path of an isometric game such as Super Mario RPG, which moved to a free-roaming 3D design later on when they started working on Super Mario 64. So maybe that game was the first actual 3D Mario game, using the powers of the FX chip. But that's just my theory on it all. And in the end, Miyamoto reformulated the idea for the Nintendo 64, not for its greater power, but because its controller had more buttons for gameplay. And at the January 1993 Consumers Electronics Show, where Star Fox made its debut, Nintendo's booth demonstrated a talking 3D polygon animation of Mario's head, which they also showed off in 1992. However, did they use the SNES or N64 for this? Well, sadly enough, neither. They ended up using some sort of advanced face rigging hardware and software. But all of this clearly shows that Miyamoto was at least experimenting heavily with the idea of a 3D Mario game. Most likely in the form of the classic starting screen of Super Mario 64 and the quite weird 3D Mario game known as Super Mario RPG. And who knows, maybe Nintendo did make some test engines, worlds, levels, and more using the SNES just to get an idea of what they would want to make. It is unlikely that they would have been able to use the N64 for this in the beginning after all. And in the end, we did get the 3D Mario game that Miyamoto was dreaming of in the form of Super Mario 64. But this wasn't the only Nintendo rumor out there, because I covered many more of them, like a DS version of Super Mario Galaxy and others. So be sure to check those out by clicking the eye icon in the upper right corner. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or whatever, or video ideas, leave them below. Subscribe and click the bell button. Leave a like, because it really helps. And I hope to see you all in the next video. Bye! Mwah!